I never knew there was so much in it. Hello everybody, Football Weekly Very Extra. When big things happen in football, we'll be here. But in the meantime, there's Europa League this week. Those quarter-finals in full. Spurs, Basle, Tottenham facing anxious wait on Bale. It's like Harry Redknapp never left. Chelsea and their appropriately well-rounded win against Rubin's boys. And Newcastle taking Estadio da Luz a little too literally. All that plus Furna Lazio, the foreign one, rounded up and dusted down with the odd tweet and post by the Football Weekly crew in this special Podo Vision Football Weekly Video Extra. Right then, woohoo! It's a very, very, very special day here at the Pods Out the Back Annex with Barry Glendenning joining us today.
Hello.
Playing the role of the accused, and his brief there, Sean Ingle. Hello. Hi, Sean. Glad you got the memo. And also Jonathan Wilson.
Hi.
Manifesting in person.
Mm-hmm.
Nice to see you, Jonathan. You two were both at Stamford Bridge yesterday.
We were.
We had a super time.
Yeah, it was all right.
Yeah, okay, good. Enthusiasm abounding here. Of course, we've always been big fans of the Europa League here at Football Weekly. It's not like we've been ignoring the competition for 6 seasons or anything. And why would we? As Louise Taylor was pointing out this week, there are so many reasons to love this competition, even more than the Champions League. A couple of stats for you. 13 competitions so far. Europa League teams have beaten the dropouts, the teams coming in from the Champions League, in 4 finals, and another 4 finals have not featured any Champions League teams at all. So even though those teams come in and muddy the waters a bit, it's still a very diverse competition, as Jonathan.
Yeah, I don't understand why people don't like it, to be honest. I think it's terribly parochial in English not to like it.
Is it our fault or is it UEFA's fault?
Well, people are going about it's a protracted competition and everything, and I guess maybe it is, but if you're... The point of the competition is it's aimed at the big teams and the medium-sized countries and the medium-sized teams and the big countries, and it's good that they have an opportunity to play European football. If you're a top team from Serbia or Ukraine or somewhere like that, this is a part of your budget. You need the games to get revenue. It's a way of, a not particularly good way, but it is the only way that there is at the moment of bridging the financial gap to the Champions League.
My problem is it's on a Thursday. You know, there's been football on a Tuesday and a Wednesday, and then more football on a Thursday. Did you not feel that maybe that's
I think basically the 7-day weeks aren't long enough.
Yeah,
that's the issue. I think we should change an 8-day week, and then I'd only be about 30.
Absolutely, excellent news.
I think it's a good competition, and it's a measure of how good it is that it endures despite UEFA's best attempts to ruin it. It is a bit bloated. It does go on a bit too long. I think quite a few of the teams, if not all of them who played last night, they'll have played 14 games by the end of this round. When Spurs won it in 1984, they played 12. So, you know, it's a bit too long.
Too long. But reaching the really exciting bit, if you're going to chop a bit, it wouldn't be this bit, it'd be the bit at the start. Sean, you were there, as I say, with Jonathan at Stamford Bridge yesterday. How was the atmosphere?
It wasn't bad. I mean, after 2 minutes, people were already chanting for Jose Mourinho. And at the end they were as well. But in between, I thought Chelsea...
Did they do the Di Matteo still, or has he got a little bit lost in all of this?
It's got quieter and quieter.
Well, he got lost yesterday because they scored in the 16th minute, which is Rafa's micromanagement. Brilliant. The game against West Ham, of course, 16th minute, he got John Terry to show his arse to the West Ham fans, which also distracted people from the Di Matteo chanting.
All right. How cold was it, Sean?
I wore long johns and 4 base layers. It was pretty cold.
So I've just noticed, actually, the banana there is touching the orange, which I believe, Jonathan, you've discussed on the pod previously, is not good, is it? That will kill
It doesn't matter if it's touching. No, the issue is if you keep fruit near bananas over a protracted period, it's not going to matter. Well, actually, this is a protracted period. You're going forever. But leaving aside the technical issues and whatever, leaving bananas next to fruit, bananas release a gas which causes other fruit to ripen quickly. So you wouldn't want to put, say, peaches or nectarines for 48 hours next to bananas because they'd rot.
The very idea. Magnificent. Well, that's 2 good cup wins in a row for Rafa Benitez now. How about that Chelsea win against Rubin? As I say, 2 big cup wins in a row. Lots of things to talk about here. Fernando Torres tweets Jonathan Wilson, Torres may be wearing a mask, but I'd recognise that first touch anywhere.
That was a gag that came to look a bit silly as things turned out. But Torres, actually, the mask was a bit more like... The Mask in the film, The Mask from 1994.
With Jim Carrey.
With Jim Carrey, where he puts on the mask and loses inhibitions and suddenly becomes a very different personality.
Absolutely. 2 goals in a big European quarter-final. It's a bit like the Champions League last season, isn't it? Is it a sign, Sean?
Well, he scored 4 goals in his last 23 games. I think we have to take stock of that. And I
He's
think
also
the other thing
scored 19 goals this season.
Yeah, he has, but
which is more.
But no, 12 of them since Rafa arrived.
but no one was going big on it when he scored 8 goals in 7 games in December. I think he has these little moments where he kind of. I mean, what I would say, I think his first touch is better. He looks more. He looks less bad. Whether he's going to be anywhere near as good as he was, I think it's far too early to say. But he was impressive last night.
Yeah, we've had a lot of these false storms, and I think one of the problems, which is something that Rafa discussed afterwards, is that it's very hard for Torres to get a run of games, which is probably what he needs to get, to build on the confidence he presumably gained from last night. But because Denver Bar's cup tied for the Europa League, Torres has to play next week away in Moscow. And that means on Sunday against Sunderland, Denver Bar will come back in. So Torres is only ever going to play alternate games while they're still in the Europa League.
Well, he's scored more than Rooney, Hernandez, Tevez, Aguero, Dzeko, Bart, Giroud, Defoe, Cisse and Lukaku this season put together. No, that last bit I made up. But he scored more than all of them. So even if it's not the Torres of old, it's actually not bad, is it?
I mean, I think it's more about perhaps the way he projects himself, the confidence he has on the pitch, the way his first touch is better than it was, the way he's interlinking with his teammates. That certainly was better last night. There wasn't any dithering or hesitation.
Was he back or was rubbish defending back?
But Rubin Kazan, everything I've seen of them, everything I've read about them, I watched them against Lokomotiv at the weekend. They look a really good defensive side, and last night they were hopeless.
This was their first away defeat in the competition.
That may well be true, but I think since the turn of the year, they played. This is their 8th game, and they kept 6 clean sheets.
Yeah.
The only goal they conceded was against Atletico Madrid, I think.
Yeah.
And they looked incredibly open. I don't know what went wrong last night.
Now, you mentioned the fact that Sunderland are coming up next for Chelsea at the weekend. By the time Chelsea take the field, they could well be out of the top 4. That's if Arsenal get the win away to West Bromwich, by no means a given. It brings us on to the subject of Sunderland, who, I don't know if you spotted this, they changed manager recently.
Yeah, apparently.
Italian fellow has come in. You were worried before about Sunderland, Jonathan, and I know you were too, Barry. Are you more or less worried now with Paolo at the helm for the last
Weirdly,
7?
relegation doesn't seem such a big issue anymore. It seems like we've got other things to worry about. Honestly, I don't know what I think, and that's why I haven't really commented on it yet, apart from my piece in
But beyond
this morning,
strictly on the field
and
tactical terms, what do you think? I mean, he's been described as a man who manages by hand grenade. Do you think that's going to be an effective way, or could it just, quite literally blow up in their faces?
There was a sort of inevitability about the drift, and I think this is a particularly Sunderland thing. If you look at the last 10 years, Sunderland have been a club who, for whatever reason, have a habit of getting on these runs where almost inexplicably they will go a preposterously long period without winning games. So even the season when they finished 10th under Steve Bruce, which is, apart from the 7th place finish under Peter Reid, the best finish in over 50 years, they still had 108 days in the middle of that season where they didn't win a game. And when Niall Quinn was manager for that 5 games beginning of the 2006-07 season, he spoke about the gremlins at the club, that there's this sort of these traumas lying just below the surface, always ready to be awakened. And he brought in Roy Keane to scare them away, and that kind of worked in the short term. Now, I would imagine if I were a gremlin and I saw Paolo Di Canio coming after me, I'd be scared. So, in a sense, it stops the inevitable drift, in the sense that things have been shaken up, probably rather more than they ought to have been, but it has at least stopped that sense of inevitable decline. So in a very short-term, very football-specific sense, I guess it might not be a bad thing.
All right, okay. Russian football, Rubin Kazan 4th, I think, right now. Yeah.
Well, I mean, a long way adrift, but they really had a very inconsistent autumn, and since sort of the end of November time, end of October time, they've been in excellent form.
Okay.
I was really surprised by how poor they were last night. I was expecting a lot more from them.
But how safe is this result for Chelsea?
I think it's pretty safe because Rubin's such a defensive side. I think they are a team whose natural mode is to contain the opposition. The idea of them going out and ripping Chelsea apart 3-0, I think, is pretty remote. I just kind of think if Rubin come out and try and attack, they will leave gaps at the back because it's just not a natural way for them to play.
Right. Well, on to Spurs then. All the drama at White Hart Lane. Now, you guys were at Stamford Bridge. Barry and I can handle this, I'm sure.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. Basle, 2-2 draw for the Swiss side, which sets them up nicely to go through. At least Spurs weren't taking this competition too seriously, or at least that's what AVB seems to have told his defenders.
Yeah, they let in 2 really, really soft goals. Could have let in more. I think they were lucky to get away with a 2-2 draw. And I think it's fair to say they completely underestimated how good Basel would be. And, you know, that's kind of understandable. We don't really know much about Swiss football, or well, I don't anyway. I suspect, you know, I might have been expecting them to arrive in their lederhosen and just not be very good.
Crossbows, I was thinking about.
Crossbows, cowbells, you know, on a mountaintop. But Basel have shown before they're a really good side, technically very adept, and pinged the ball around beautifully last night. And I think Spurs were they caught Spurs on the hop with just how good they were.
Did you see some of the action from
Only the highlights.
Right. They look like Barcelona, if you will.
I think
absolutely terrific.
From what I saw, that Spurs were lucky to get a point in the end.
Right. Well, this is a Basel team that, of course, helped Man United out of the Champions League.
Yeah, but they've lost some of their players since then, or they didn't do particularly well in the Champions League qualifiers. And it was a surprise. I mean, the bookies had Spurs as huge favourites. I think most people expected they would win this leg.
Well, some Swiss papers this morning calling this the greatest result ever in Swiss football. Yep, that
really?
big.
You say Barcelona, of course, it was the reason Barcelona wear those colours is they took their colours from Basel.
No.
And Joan Gamper, the man who founded Barcelona, was a Swiss bloke who had played for Basel.
Well, there you go. That's something. Did you know? Well, it's not the best ever Swiss result in European competitions because FC Zurich a couple of years back they beat Milan in the Champions League. They got all the way through
they got
to
the semi in 80. Oh, I don't know.
They got 1964. They were semi-finalists and 77.
77. Yeah, Liverpool beat them in 77.
Basel, of course, got to the quarterfinals of the UEFA Cup. I'm boring everyone, I know, but against Borough in 2006. But
was that game?
Oh, there you go,
Yeah.
Jonathan. What? Based on your limited viewing and your extensive viewing of this, Barry, how far could they go, Basel?
I think they're as good a side as is left in the competition. I said on the proper podcast yesterday, not that this is in any way improper, Basel were the most indisciplined side in the competition, and that Spurs might suffer some damage as a result of the game. And as luck would have it, and just coincidentally, I don't claim to be a prophet, they've lost 3 players. So yes, remarkable prescience from me, which I'm determined to comment on, even if you don't.
I don't think Basel have brushed off Spurs quite yet. I mean, I do think they'll, one game taken in isolation is another thing. I think Spurs will still probably go there, have a decent chance of getting a result.
Right.
Yes, it was a Basel brush.
Basel brush. Just checking. Okay. No, so the 2-2. But, and yet, Barry, you called it spot on, the rough, tough, dirty playing Swiss. They've taken Gareth Bale out of the picture.
Well, Gareth took himself out of the picture with just
The fella stood on his foot.
I think he just went over on his ankle. It was bad luck, but I could be wrong.
All right. But is it the Bale injury? Defoe is out as well. Gallas, massive, lost that at the back, and of course Aaron Leonard. Is it this year's lasagna?
It depends. We don't know yet how serious. You want me?
I want you to say. Do you think this is going to compromise Spurs' run-in?
Well, it depends because we don't know yet what the extent of Bale's injury is going to be, and obviously he'd be a huge blow. Andre Villas-Boas seems to think that he will only miss 2 games, but he's misdiagnosed before. He said Sandro would only miss a game or 2.
Technically, he's not a doctor.
Well, I'm not being critical of him for misdiagnosing, but obviously Spurs fans will have a clearer idea later today.
Everton this weekend. Now, they were without Bale when they went to Goodison Park earlier in the season. Of course, they lost 2 very, very late goals from Everton, a 2-1 that day. The stat is, Sean, that when he doesn't score, they don't win games.
I'm not completely convinced by that. I mean, I wrote a piece in The Guardian quite recently that sort of shows that Spurs' record with and without Bale over the last 3 seasons is not that much difference. They win just under 50% with Bale. They've won just over 50% without him in the last 3 seasons. I mean, another thing I guess to point out on Saturday is that Everton won't have Fellaini either. So, I would still favour Spurs slightly, although obviously it's going to be a very difficult game. And Spurs have a very difficult set of matches over the next few weeks before their running eases up a bit. They have Sunderland the last game of the season, which you'd imagine they'd probably tonk them. But yeah, clearly this is a huge game, and with Chelsea and Arsenal pushing hard, they need to win.
Now, Fenerbahce Lazio. Fenerbahce looked good. Great weekend, great midweek result for them, because Galatasaray lost, and then they won. They were all out in the streets with flags and a big 2-0 win over Lazio, who had Closer on the bench because he's been. Nobody really minds that much. But anyway, Fenerbahce looked good.
And Lazio will have closed doors in the return leg because of their. But I think they should have been thrown out as a competition, to be honest, because I think that was their 4th offence that earned them a 2-match sort of closed door, no fans ban, and for racist behaviour from the fans. I think just if it's that chronic, just sling them out.
Clearly, it's an ongoing issue, especially for Lazio, who face a pretty rotten end to the season. They've got the Rome derby coming up on Monday. Very tough run in for them as they try and get back into Europe, assuming they're allowed next season, and they don't look very good for this one. No away goals, 2-0 down, etc., etc., etc.
It's a dodgy pen, though, wasn't it?
Yes, to be fair, they were very upset about the refereeing. Benfica Newcastle. Finally. Big club. Haven't had a trophy since the 60s. Of course, it's Benfica I'm talking about. They haven't won a European trophy since 1962. Isn't that extraordinary for a club that big?
And Newcastle's in 69.
69, yeah. So if anyone's due a big win, it's Benfica, and they certainly look well on their way.
I'm going to that game next week.
Will you? Okay.
I'm quite glad it's still alive. I think it would have been very bad had it been 3-0 or something.
Right.
And then by all accounts, Newcastle were pretty unlucky. It hit the post twice, and 2 defensive errors cost them late on.
They had a terrific start, Newcastle, and there was this suggestion that Pardew decided to go all guns blazing. Great opening goal.
Yeah.
Super. Glad we're all agreed on that. But then you said a little bit unlucky with hitting the post, etc. But Davide Santon's back pass, surely that takes it beyond the realm of misfortune, no?
They're missing key players. They had gone, I think, is it 5 games without conceding a goal?
Newcastle.
Yeah, in the Europa League. So they haven't made many mistakes thus far, or at least if they have, they haven't been punished for them. So they were probably due a bit of bad luck last night, but it's not over for them, and they could still get through. They've done well so far this year.
Well, 3-1. It's a big scoreline to turn around. The other issue is that they've now conceded 7 goals in their last 2 matches, and up next they've got the mighty Fulham. You've got to be scared if you're a Newcastle fan. We're going to have a little smile about that, but actually Fulham, who used to be rubbish on the road, they've got a really good record of late away to Newcastle, and they're also coming off back-to-back wins in the Premier League. Fulham.
Yeah, and Newcastle are not safe yet.
What?
Far from safe in the Premier League.
It's a very strange thing that it's not impossible that if Sunderland were to beat them, which possibly is impossible. But if they think back to 99, we beat them then. They could go above them.
Sunderland.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, that's done. We won't worry about that now, is what Alan Pardew said about the relegation threat on March the 11th, but he's got to be ruining those words now, because successive defeats mean he's just 3 points away from the bottom 3. And with the Europa League, etc.,
I agree with you, but at the same time, you still got to think class will out. This isn't the Newcastle side when Shearer took over, when I think he only won 1 of 8 the last games, and that you could sense there was no confidence. They're a decent team. They probably overperformed last season. They underperformed for the first part of this season. You would still expect them to get the couple of wins they need to sort of finish.
Yeah, you would, and I broadly agree with that. But I still think there is a danger that a team suddenly sort of opens its eyes, thinks, Christ, we're going to get we're in the relegation scrap, and they haven't really noticed it until 3 or 4 games to the end of the season. And I think that can happen with teams who are in cup competitions. That sort of overshadows everything else, and there's a sort of perception of, well, we'll sort this out when we're done with the cup. And if you suddenly that panic descends, I think it can be very difficult to shake off.
All right, well, big game then this weekend against Fulham, and then a huge one next week, which you'll be going to, Jonathan. That'll be a terrific match at St James's Park as they try and turn around that 3-1 deficit. We'll be back in Pod Division next Friday morning with Football Weekly Very Extra to look at who's made it through to the semis. In the meantime, many, many thanks to Barry Glendenning, to Shawnee Ingle, lovely to see you, and Jonathan Wilson. We salute you as always, and you, viewer. We've got a paper review up for your delectation, should you wish, on the Guardian website. Otherwise, we'll be back with Football Weekly on Monday, so perhaps you'll join us for that. In the meantime, have yourselves a lovely weekend.